Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the first Farm Country Update webinar of 2024. My name is Matthew J. Grassi. I am the Technology and Machinery Editor with Farm Journal, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Really quickly, a couple housekeeping items. If you have questions during any portion of the presentation, you can type those into the chat or the Q&A option at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be available at farmjournal.com for download later this week. An email with a link will hit your email inbox if you're registered for this presentation. Now, let's get into today's program. Today's topic is one that hits a bit close to home for me, having spent my time prior to joining Farm Journal as a marketing manager at a large technology-focused tree and ornamental shrub nursery here in Northeast Ohio, where I live. Today's topic is engaging with tech-savvy farmers in agricultural marketing. Now, we've invited a couple industry experts to join us today as we present to you research findings from the Farm Journal Data and Insights team. I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce yourself and give us a quick glimpse into your background as ag tech experts, please. Steve, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Steve Cubbage. I am a contributing writer for Farm Journal, but also a long background in precision agriculture. I own my own business for over 25 years there out of Nevada, Missouri, and also currently have a business in the consulting realm of sustainability. Called Longitude 94 that I'm now based here out of Kansas City.
Thanks for joining us today, Steve. Appreciate it. Daryl, would you like to go now?
Hello, everybody. My name's Daryl Matthews. I'm a Farm Journal contributing editor on agriculture technology. Previous to joining Farm Journal, I was the senior vice president of Trimble's agriculture and forestry business for 8 years. And I do lots of consulting work with the OEMs, the major OEMs and tractor manufacturers on technology integration and where technology is going. So looking forward to today's Farm Journal panel and our discussion.
Thanks for joining us, Dale. We had some interesting Trimble news drop this week, so good to have you.
We did, yes, we did.
All right, Ben, it's your turn, sir.
Unmute myself. Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Gist. I am Vice President of Intelligence Products at Farm Journal. I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been with Farm Journal for about 2 years now, leading data and insights, and our team fueled a lot of the slides and takeaways that we're going to walk through as we talk about understanding the smart farming and the type of tech-savvy farmer. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Now, before we get into the panel discussion with our experts that you just met, Ben is going to kind of dive into the meat and potatoes of the research report that he and his team helped put together for our now annual Smart Farming Week takeover, which actually took place just over a month ago. Ben, go ahead and take it away when you're ready.
Great. So before we jump into the insights and the research and profiling we did of our producer audience, I thought I'd start with this slide. And this, I'd like to say, is an intentionally blurry, crowded slide because it's meant to put us in the shoes and in the minds of the ag producers that we all engage with all the time. And so you have this combination of forces right now, external ones like changing markets, commodity prices decreasing, consumer preferences evolving around how food should be grown, sustainability and regenerative agriculture programs. And so producers are dealing with all these forces while at the same time, there are thousands of brands pushing out even more thousands of products and messages all competing for what in reality is not that big of a group of people's attention. And so the purpose of today's call is really, as marketers and from Farm Journal as editors and people who engage with this audience all the time, how do you capture their attention and break through this noise in the limited amount of time you have a chance to grab their attention and really resonate with what they're going through in their operation in a way that's going to have them take the action that you hope they do.
That is quite the gauntlet there, Ben, that tech savvy farmers got to sort through today. Geez.
It really is, yeah. Okay, so Matthew teed this up a bit at the beginning, but I thought I'd begin with the smart farming slides with a little overview about why smart farming. And so to take one step back, Matthew mentioned that smart farming is our first, what we're calling content pillars or content beachheads, where Farm Journal is going to be reporting and pushing out articles and content about these topics all year round. But we also do these week-long blitzes where these topics take over our media properties. And it began with smart farming, which we're going to cover today. But upcoming ones for next quarter are next gen farmer. So what's that young up and coming farmer thinking, feeling, what motivates them, what are their concerns, then input decision making, and then lastly, sustainability. So this is really a framework that we're using throughout the year. And today we're going to cover smart farming. The last thing I'll point out here on this slide is on the right-hand side, you see a screenshot of the cover page of a smart farming report that we built. So we did extensive survey research into our US ag audience, and then also did a deep analysis from our first-party data set of these producers, looking at the content they engage with, the motivations they exhibit in terms of farming and running their operation. And we'll dive into both insights from what those producers told us from the survey, but then also what we observe about them in terms of how they engage in our media properties. So you see the kind of the high level questions on the left in the green text. So these are some of the questions that we sought to answer through this research and through this analysis of our audience. So with that, let's dive into what our data says about what we're going to call the tech savvy farmer. So we're going to kind of switch here from smart farmer, which we didn't want to lead with that title because we didn't want to imply that other farmers weren't smart, but rather these kind of tech forward, tech savvy farmers in the space. So I'm going to begin with a chart that shows one of the first questions we asked in our survey, which is around adoption of technologies and practices today. So it looks at what they currently adopt and then what they intend to adopt in the next 2 years. And so it wasn't surprising to me, and probably no one on this call will be surprised by the practices and the technologies that are most adopted today. Yield monitoring, auto steer, variable rate application. These were kind of the earlier precision ag practices that we really saw adoption many years ago, and they continue to be dominant today. What I did find interesting now is if we look at the focus on the green bars on the chart. And so the green bars are showing the change in trends. So what do people intend to do in the future? And now focusing more on the left-hand side of the chart, you see these emerging technologies that are that our audience is saying they intend to increase their adoption of, focused on things like selective spraying, whether that's drones or other methods, fully autonomous machinery, grain bin monitoring, and field level accounting software. So to kind of summarize some takeaways of what we saw in that chart, one theme that popped out is that there's a common thread between what's adopted today and what they intend to adopt in the future, all around cost savings. And that spans inputs to labor. So if we think about the emerging technologies that are likely to increase adoption, that looks like things that are geared towards optimizing or decreasing input use. So selective spraying, whether drone or others, as well as today, variable rate application either promise to optimize the same amount of input or enable, a more efficient and potentially less use of inputs. And then similar with labor, autonomous machinery obviously ultimately could bring in labor savings. So there's this big theme and focus of cost, which is not totally surprising. But then when we started to drill in more to say, what qualities are you looking for in this ag tech space out of a product? Cost, no surprise, in the orange box was the top answer. But when we started to tease out other responses and other questions we asked, another theme emerged that I think is relevant both to product development, but also as marketers. And that's the ease of use and the ease of integrating a technology or a product into their operation. So we heard things like it needs to be productive right out of the box. It needs to fit in seamlessly with my current operation and equipment. And so when I think of that from a marketing standpoint, and going back to the earlier theme of, how do you break through? I think a message that leads with how easy the solution is to fit into their operation, how seamless that'll be, might pique interest and lead to more engagement than maybe a standard ROI message that, although effective, might be kind of a standard one that everyone's using today. So now moving into our second key finding. So this one was interesting to me. It kind of surprised me. We looked at tech adoption across a number of different factors. We looked at tech adoption by age, by farm size, by income, things like that. And I expected to see a trend where age was a kind of a good predictor of tech adoption. But that actually wasn't the case. Age was a pretty poor predictor of it. Rather, it was farm scale and resources that were the best predictors of that adoption and enthusiasm to try out these smart farming technologies. So then diving in a little deeper, you see these charts here. And so starting on the far left, you'll see that the average or the median age across the whole tech adoption curve was the same. It's the 55 to 64 group. So we didn't see this trend of younger farmers being more inclined to adopt tech. What we did see now moving to the right is that early adopter group, the median acreage was the highest there. So the 2,000 to 5,000 acre farmers were much more likely to respond as early adopters. Similar with income, our highest income group was the median income for early adopters. So you see that really it's the resources, access to the finance, and the willingness to try something new is really skewed towards those larger operations. And we didn't ask this question in the survey, but I don't think it's too far of a leap to also think about it's potentially the successful and profitable operations too. So it might be that a large farm that is struggling might not be willing to adopt that new technology, but one that's doing well and expanding is more likely to do so. And then we flipped it around. So rather than saying, what qualities do you look for in a product, we say, what barriers would you look out for or are you concerned about in adopting new tech? And again, cost is king. You see those, right at the top. But I think about that time frame piece, the second one. How long does it take to get a return on investment? Most respondents said they would need to see a return within 2 years. And so when you go back to the scale and the resource side, a lot of those smaller operations or ones that are just strapped for cash, they may not feel like they have the time, even 2 years, to wait to recoup that investment. And so I think of that somewhat from a go-to-market strategy even, are there ways to create a pricing model that smooths that investment out over time versus putting that upfront burden initially? So that covers the survey part. So everything that we just walked through were questions we asked and sort of responses and takeaways from surveying our audience. This next portion is going to be about what we observe of that tech savvy farmer. And so to define this group, I guess right off the bat, what we've done is we have a affinity, or basically a content interest group, where we're looking at who the producers are who over engage or over index on content consumption about smart farming. So all of our articles that are related to this topic are tagged, and then we look at who's actually engaging, and more importantly, who's over engaging, who's above average in their interest in the topics. And so the slides that follow are about that group in the Farm Journal database. So I'll start with a heat map. So this is showing darker shaded counties are counties where there are a higher concentration of producers than average engaged with this topic. And then lighter shaded counties are where producers are under engaged with the topic. So we've been using this with partners. One example is ones that are going through dealer networks and are trying to prioritize where should they be investing in those dealers in a world where setting up a national sales channel is not a viable strategy right off the bat. So we're helping them, fish where the fish are, so to speak, find that highest concentration of producers who are likely to be interested in their product or service, and then use that to help recruit and bring on dealers. For those that don't go through dealers or go direct, we're also using these to say, where are geographies where you can get very targeted and really invest properly in the marketing, the digital activation that you need to break through. The number of tactics, the amount of impressions that can be very expensive to do nationally. But if we can start small and really prioritize where the people are who are most likely to be interested, we can more optimally deploy that spend. So then this is a screenshot of one slide of our full profile of the tech-savvy farmer. I'll call out here that the full profile is another 6 or 7 slides that are really designed to be a marketing playbook for how you would engage, where you would engage, topics to avoid, topics to bring up, that are designed to help you connect and break through to this audience. But in this example, I'll call out a few things. So one, on the left-hand side, just some baseline demographics. You see that the age in our audience that's interested in this topic matches with what the survey said. So this is not a younger audience. It's 64 years old is the average age of our tech-savvy farmer. They're also quite larger than our average farmer in our database. So you see the average acreage over 2,700 acres, almost $900,000 GFI. So it's interesting to see that what we're observing and who's interested in the topic is matching up with the survey data of who's saying they're inclined to adopt the tech. We then looked at things like optimal channels to reach them. No surprise, this is a very digital heavy group. And then other attributes or indexes that we calculate, things like how price sensitive are they? They're a little bit less price sensitive than the average farmer. Their risk profile, in this case, they're exactly average. So they're neither overtly risk takers or overtly risk averse. The other thing I'll call out too is the online purchasing. They really over-indexed on that category. So something to consider as you think about either creating an ecosystem where selling direct online is viable, or even an ecosystem where you're supporting your dealers, but in a way that enables that online experience up to purchasing, or at least up to the point where they're ordering something. And so with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Matthew. I'll just call out, like I mentioned at the beginning, the smart farming, this is really a framework for our content beachheads moving forward. So the same approach of doing survey research, creating these in-depth reports, building these audience profiles about how to talk to them and where to talk to them and what motivates them. And then ultimately those strategic playbooks for content recommendations are part of our core offering now, and we'll look forward to next quarter. So Matthew.
Thank you, Ben. Real quick before Ben dives off, just wanted to note, because I know the question is going to come up, where did this data come from? So Farm Journal surveyed the most tech-forward farmers in our community to provide these answers. The data referenced by Ben in his report is drawn from a variety of Farm Journal intelligence products representing both row crop and livestock producers in 2023 and 2024. Good stuff, Ben. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time to break down all that research you've been working so hard on over the last few months here, I guess.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity to share it.
Thank you, Ben. All right, so that concludes the research presentation portion of this webinar. So now we will dive into the panel discussion with our illustrious panel here, Daryl and Steve. Appreciate you guys hanging on through that presentation there for this part of it.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. It's very good, very insightful.
So fellas, let's just jump right into it while we have everyone here and a captive audience. So I'm just going to throw out a few of the things that jumped out to me from that research findings presentation. First of all, the 60% of, or nearly 60% of farmers agree that new ag tech gives them a competitive advantage. And so for me, when I think about competitive advantage, I'm thinking about things that can help them right-size labor, be more efficient on the farm, produce the same or even a better crop with less inputs, less capital expenditures, less resources. I just wonder what your thoughts are there, and if there's any, newish or newer ag tech that you're seeing in the market that provides those competitive advantages. I guess we'd start with Steve on that one. Steve, are you there? Steve, you might be muted, sir.
There we go. How's
There you
that?
go.
Okay.
Perfect.
I think looking back, kind of the evolution of smart farming or just even precision farming back in the day that it was called, auto steer was one of those technologies that really catapulted the efficiency gains out of the gate, and all the technologies that kind of piggybacked off of that. And so I think probably we're going into that next generation with robotics and artificial intelligence. So I think those are the things that really keep an eye on if I'm looking at what's next. And so, yeah, I think that area is going to be very hot given the labor shortages and just efficiencies.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we see things over in Europe, crops left in the field because the labor just isn't there to get those crops out of the field. These technologies that can really help a farmer do more with less are huge. Daryl, any thoughts to add there?
I think what we're seeing when you look at this in the newer technology, variable rate everything is something that's growing. We started with variable rate fertilizer and variable rate seeding. Now we're starting to see varieties come into that, variable rating of different varieties across the field, and then different plant density in that field. So you're starting to see variable rate everything. And that's where the prescription and working with your local agronomist is really critical, and really understanding what your field can perform at and having that relationship with a local agronomist. So I think that's one area where even that's older technology, and most of the farms are already saying that they've adopted variable rate technology, but I'm starting to see a big expansion of that variable rate technology. Automation and autonomy, absolutely addressing the labor issue and the access to labor. How do we quickly take an unskilled worker that hasn't had a lot of experience in doing something and quickly make them a skilled laborer? And the way to do that is through technology that really can send notifications and really build on the understanding and what that unskilled worker is doing, and making sure that we're monitoring and understanding that as the farm manager. So I think that's a big area that we're constantly seeing automation and more autonomy come in.
And the smart farming report backs that up, your assertion on VRA and everything. That green bar was quite high there of folks are doing that today. We have the data, we have the capabilities with the technologies that are available today to variable rate, as you said, pretty much everything that's going on that acre. So as long as it fits the workflow, why not, right?
Correct, absolutely.
Awesome. So another interesting nugget that came out of that report, I thought, was that nearly half of farmers are willing to pay a premium for higher performing inputs. Now, I think there's contextually that can mean different things to different people. Just having come off the winter trade show circuit a few months ago, tons of noise. You could call it noise, you could call it hype, you could call it what you want about biological products, specialty fertilizers, biological nitrogen and fungicides, and novel new seed treatments, etc. I just wonder from both your perspectives if you're seeing a lot of farmer interest in that segment thus far, and are we seeing the rubber hit the road with biologicals yet? Are farmers seeing the results when they're putting those things on, or is there still some education that's necessary?
I'll take a stab. I think there's obviously in all of this, there's education what technology it is. I think that's one of the things that's been missing over the years, as far as that we just assume that this is not an Apple iPad. This is a little more complicated than that, and so, but I think there is obviously some hype around the biologicals, and we saw that early on. When Roundup Ready even came out, there was a lot of hype, what that means. And but I think agronomy is local. And
Yeah.
so just being able to address the growers at a local level and what that means, because everything performs differently in different regions of the country, and even 30 to 50 miles north or south, it can mean a different thing. So I think being able to have that research and have that those performance data and those different products is going to be key to really making a dent in that market.
Yeah, I remember Maryland farmer Trey Hill at Commodity Classic this year telling me, man, I just need to get these biologicals on the farm and try them out and see what works for me. So that's right along what you're saying there, Steve. Daryl,
Absolutely.
I know your background's more in hardware, but are you hearing or seeing much there on biological products, or?
There is no doubt a significant interest in the biological products, and it's really driven around soil health. Farmers are always trying to address soil health, and they're more than willing to take on a biological, but it's a growing market. It's very fast, and my advice would be do lots of local work with those biologicals and see what works best for your area and for your farm. No different than what Steve said. Agronomy is very local, and I think the biological piece really needs to be something that needs to be tested on your farm and see how it works. But you can see the significant focus of farmers on soil health and the continued focus around that. And biologicals are something that that offer that opportunity, but which ones are best are going to be measured locally.
Yeah, so I spent a few years prior to this in the nursery industry. Mycorrhizae fungi are huge in that production system. This is kind of the first time I've heard of row crop growers putting those fungi on broad acres, which is amazing to just hear that people are doing that. And I hope the results shine through with that practice. Let's go on through some more of this report. Obviously, Ben's research kind of confirmed what we all know. Cost and ROI are two huge factors when a farmer's looking at any technology. Are you seeing, like, we're seeing a lot of the equipment manufacturers, some of the precision ag hardware providers kind of shift to a service as a subscription model, does that help alleviate some of those concerns with growers? And are we seeing some traction there?
Sure, I could talk a little bit about that, Matthew. It's subscription or services a model is where you pay a monthly subscription fee for access to technology. And it's certainly not something that that is well adopted and penetrating significant acres in agriculture. We're familiar with it if we're buying music, for instance, or things like that in our entertainment world, or we're buying access to videos and things. So we're familiar with that. What it gives you is if there is a significant ROI for the farmer, and that ROI could be a constantly updating of the technology on the farm. So what I'm saying is, in this type of model and payment model, there could be a technology assurance program where the farmer is always getting a technology upgrade on the farm every 2 to 3 years. So they've got the latest technology versus having to buy it every 7 years. Typically, hardware technology lasts about 7 years, and they're rotating that out every 7. And so this would give you the opportunity to have a constantly upgrading technology environment. The other thing is you have to have a discussion with your financial accountant, because there is some financial pieces to this. It eliminates capital expense on the farm in technology. And when you have a capital expense in technology, that means then you have a depreciation table that you're constantly depreciating on that equipment. When you pay a subscription model, it is a straight line operating expense, no different than fertilizer or crop inputs, other crop inputs.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's fully burdened against the business in a year. So that is a discussion to have with your financial accountant. Some farmers want to have that as an operating expense, and some farmers want to have it as a capital expense and depreciate only a portion of the technology expense every year. So those are things that has to be discussed with your local, with your accountant, and understanding what's going to be best for your farm.
So it sounds like there's some potential tax things like that you need to sort through before you just go one way or the other.
Correct. Yeah. No, there are some definite advantages to it. There are some challenges too. Economies of scale. If you are a large farmer, you're trying to drive economies of scale, and a subscription model charges everybody the same. So you're not getting that economies of the scale advantage. So where you can run more acres through a machine, or you can run more acres through your technology than somebody else, so you get economies of scale. In this case, you're going to pay the same monthly fee as anybody else, whether you're small or big. So there's that challenge. Again, you have to have that conversation with your accountant, and also how important technology upgrade is for you on your farm.
Steve, anything you need to add there? Or do you think you covered it pretty?
I think you covered it pretty well. You know, when a subscription model, you're always wondering too. You know, obviously, Daryl mentioned the kind of that 7. I always said that, you know, technology does have that 5 to 7 year kind of shelf life out there. And so, you know, the question is, when does that technology renew in that subscription model? You know, what is that timeline? And I think that's, you know, is a, you know, a new thing coming down the pipe that that to replace that, because you certainly sometimes don't want to run that technology maybe for the full 7 years. It may be a 3 year. I mean, we're replacing you know, your cell phone every 2 to 3 now. And so
Yep.
what does it look like, and asking some of those questions. And I think, and then the second thing I really think on any type of subscription model is that not just throwing the technology out there, but having some type of, bundled support or education or that almost the Geek Squad mentality with that, I think sits better than just having I'm being charged for this technology regardless of whether I get support or not.
So not only important for the farmers to consider those implications when they maybe move to the SaaS model, but also for the ag marketers in the chat or in the presentation today, something to think about. What are those are implications for the user base as they look at some of those different models of selling and marketing? Interesting. Well, fellas, let's bust some myths here. So I remember when the millennials, I being an older millennial, I remember when we were kind of the young up and coming folks on the block, and now that's changed. There's all these other generations. I can't even remember what they're called or any of that. But so Ben's research saying age is not the predictor of technology adoption. I was just curious, you guys both have a lot of experience in this field. Is that something you've seen over the years and you would agree with?
Daryl, I'll let you go and then I'll chime in.
Okay. Certainly age is not a predictor. But I can tell you that a large operation understands economies of scale. They're trying to drive economies of scale, so they look at technology sooner and quicker because they're trying to drive savings on every bushel that they produce. They're trying to look for ways that they can save pennies, and technology will do that. So they're a faster adoption of that. But one of the things I also have seen in growers that adopt this technology faster, they usually have a close partnership with someone who is advising them as a technology expert.
There it is.
And
Yep.
somebody that's working with them. That could be a family member, that could be a local agronomist, or that could be a tech advisor that's local, that's really helping them with. We've seen good uptake and good response out of this type of technology. And I would advise you to build that. But it's critical to have that relationship so that you can have someone help you in the adoption of that technology as it moves along. As Steve mentioned, support as you're going along is going to be a critical component. The other
That could
part
even
is,
be a Steve Cubbage. I'm sorry.
yeah, the other part is willing to experiment and try the technology and make it fit in your farming operation is going to be critical too. And that's where having a relationship with somebody that can help you with that as a technology expert in your local area, and then bouncing off of them where you're having some challenges and where you're having some successes, and trying to make that technology adaptable to your farm and working very well for you. Steve?
Well, I think 10 years ago that the results of that survey as far as age would have been probably different. But I think you've got to consider that the precision farming revolution is now almost 3 decades or more than 3 decades old, and so the technology is now part of agriculture, period. And so regardless of generation, it's embedded and enmeshed in operations, big and small. And so age to me is not a factor anymore. It's just a matter of just the appetite and basically the resources that farm has to adopt that technology.
So it sounds like from a marketing standpoint that we're not as concerned with age. It's more perhaps varying the message when we're going to these larger, highly capitalized operations versus others, and finding success, helping them integrate tech there versus being so focused on age and who's adopting the technology and what their age is. Huh.
I would think a farm that's already adopted a significant amount of technology probably has a higher propensity to adopt more of it too, right? So questions and understanding of the technology they're using today would help you to understand that they're probably a lot more adverse to take on new technology as they go forward.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Steve.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
No, I totally agree. And you know, having you know, that trusted advisor, that inner circle, and growing that, I think that's one of the things that really needs to take place in the technology side of things, is that, you know, you got to realize that the grower is not the only one, or the producer is not the only one touching that field. And you know, that may be an ag retailer, it may be you know, crop insurance. You can go down the list of the kind of that inner circle. And I think being able to share that, those resources, and understand uh, the value being created by the data that comes off of that, and the technology being used, uh, being on the same page is going to be critical. And I don't think there's nearly enough of those meetings that take place directly addressing kind of the compatibility piece, the
Mm.
sharing, and whose data is it and where is it.
Yeah, we've still got a ways to go on the data standardization and ownership conversation, it feels like, but hopefully pretty soon here we will get there. Ag Gateway and some others are doing some great work there and trying to push that ball forward for quite some time now. So hopefully we can get some answers there pretty quickly. Fellas, something I was curious about from your perspectives is so with the OEMs and equipment in general, there's been a focus lately on retrofitting tech to older equipment from, you know, pretty much the whole spectrum of the big three and beyond. Daryl, you specifically worked for Trimble for years. I think that's an approach that Trimble has championed for quite some time. What about that approach resonates with farmers, do you think?
Well, I think the big thing why it resonates is 50% of farmers are operating a mixed fleet. And a mixed fleet is just not different colored equipment. It's also different aged equipment. It could be all one color, but it's an older piece of equipment. And so those pieces of equipment still are being utilized on the farm, and they want them all interconnected, and the ability to put some technology onto that and upgrade that older piece of equipment so that it's got the newest technology on it. That's really why they want that. The tractor doesn't leave the farm very often. A lot of them are traded. Most of them are traded.
True.
But the big thing is it's just not one piece of equipment that you're working on the farm with. You're working with several of them, and you want a capability for all of them to communicate. You want A/B lines to communicate, for instance, between all the pieces of equipment. And you want that interoperability. And that's where the retrofit program, and why there's so much focus on that, is that often everybody talks about the new equipment and the purchase of new equipment, but there's an awful lot of older equipment that's out there that needs a technology refresh, and that's where the retrofit programs come in.
And Steve, I'd guess you have a unique perspective there as well, having worked with Record Harvest. I know they're a dealer of some aftermarket add-on precision tech that's pretty relevant in the market.
Well, I really do think, you know, obviously when you're trying out something new, as far as a new technology or something, a retrofit, you know, a lot of times, you know, from an accounting standpoint, may make a whole lot more sense than just quote unquote having to literally trade up to you know, a $500,000 machine just to try out the new tech. So that's I you know, that's how AutoSteer really got its start. And you kind of see it as time goes on, the technology becomes an OEM integration, and it becomes the norm. So I think it's just kind of the natural progression that as new technologies emerge, it's certainly the easier way to adopt, at least for the early adopters, and get that benefit. And truthfully, it's a numbers game. And if you can get that benefit, for the direct cost of just a retrofit, that's probably a good day from an accounting standpoint.
Well, fellas, this has been insightful. Some great insights here for the audience. Let's address the elephant in the room. Nobody likes a hype man, right? So, I mean, I listened to the Nathan Filady podcast this morning that just came out, and they actually touched on this. I talked to you about this yesterday, Steve, when we spoke. Ag tech adoption right now, it feels like we're somewhat in I think, Steve, you used the word laggard period, but it seems like things are flat kind of currently. Farmers are all looking for something that can really stand out and grab their attention and drive that efficiency on the farm. And maybe it's not there yet. Maybe it's biologicals. Maybe it's autonomous tractors. Maybe it's these swarms of small robotics for field work to take that task off the farm manager's plate. Is there anything you guys are seeing that you feel can move the needle in that regard here in the near future?
I think it just depends on what you define as near future. Yeah, and
3 to 5, maybe.
I think 3 to 5 years, we're definitely going to see, some of the things we mentioned earlier, the AI, the robotics piece, continue to ramp up. There's always a tipping point that happens. Sometimes it happens a lot faster than we sometimes predict or even think. But we're just seeing some of these technologies just come to a head. And yeah, we may be in a lull because we've gotten very comfortable with some of the technologies or legacy technologies that are out there.
Daryl, if you have anything to add, go ahead. But we have a question actually coming in from the audience as well after that.
Sure. So I think selective spraying is something that's on the early horizon here in the next 5 years. And selective spraying can be green on green identification of weeds within a crop through utilization of cameras and LiDAR and different things to identify that. And then, identifying of a green in a brown background environment, something you'd use in fallow spraying. I think those are on the horizon, and we're in the early stages, first innings of that, in that as we gain more imagery and more understanding of the technology, it's going to improve substantially. I hear from farmers challenges are around speed and you have to slow down substantially often to identify those weeds within a green crop. Some of them don't. It depends on the contrast between those weeds and the crop. And but that will change, and it will no different than the way computers have changed and their speed has substantially increased. This is going to change also in the capability in selective spraying. And we're in the early innings of that. It will come, and depending on the farm and the operation, it's going to fit in very well as a way to, again, bring some more input efficiency onto the farm.
Excellent. Well, let's get to this audience question. Ben, while I have you here, if you don't mind diving back in, I believe this question might be somewhat related to the research report here, but so our question is, our audience is wondering what correlation are you seeing ag tech adoption to sustainable farming? Is there a correlation there where farmers that are interested in sustainable farming practices are more apt to adopt technology?
Yeah, so I guess first thought, so yes, we do have some findings here that I can share. We're also, when we do our Q4 content pillar, the whole focus is sustainability, and we're going to look at that intersection between the two audiences once we've done that. That said, we've done a lot of research on sustainability through our Trust in Food division. And the biggest thing that comes to mind here is that the concerns of adopting sustainable practices and the concerns of adopting new tech are pretty like mirror each other pretty closely. So it's the same sentiments around cost, payback, but also support and feeling like the thing, whether it's buying a new piece of technology or changing a practice, easily fits in and does not overtly disrupt my operation. So more to come there when we can actually dive into the demographics and the cuts of the responses more. But at a high level, that's what I've seen. Interested too. I mean, Steve and Daryl, you guys are close to this as well.
So one thing I would say is that, there seems to be a shift, or there needs to be a shift in the technology from us to really address the needs of the sustainability market. And one of the things is that there is a difference between the technology that we've really relied on so far. It's more of agronomy based specifically. I mean, it's at both the ag retail and on the farm side of things. So we've really focused on yield. We've really focused on, what products and how to apply them. The sustainability is more of just a track record of what you did in that field. And I think what we're finding out is that there's a lot of missing or gaps in that technology. A good example is that we try to get things like how much nitrogen did you put on? Well, a lot of nitrogen is anhydrous put on by 40-year-old Raven 440 consoles. And so that we don't have a digital record of that. So I think those are the type of things you have to think about, is that if you're going to be in that sustainability space, what technology do you need to do at the farm level to address and be ready for that?
And record that tillage data, right, Steve? I know that's,
Record tillage data.
let's do it. Let's start doing that. Daryl, anything to add, sir?
The sustainability, absolutely, there is a correlation between an acquisitive farmer that is a grower that is taking on technology is also going to be inquisitive on sustainable farming practices. So there's a correlation there. And I think Ben will be able to pull that out as he asks some more questions and pulls that through. But certainly in my experience, there's a high correlation. The thing with sustainability, as Steve mentioned, is sustainability takes data. The awful word of data, right, that we all get frustrated with, is that it's sustainability wants to know a record of what are all the practices and things that you did on that acre. And so that takes the data in order to be a part of the sustainability programs. And so we need to get a correlation of ensuring that the technology can produce the data easily and really align to the sustainability programs and what they want reported. It's an awful lot of work. If you do it one-on-one and you're just doing it on all the individual reports, technology can do that. I think artificial intelligence is going to improve that in the work that we're doing, get rid of the monotonous work of providing data tables. So
all you tech providers out there, let's take that heavy lift off the farmer's back. Let's use text, sensors, AI, as Daryl mentioned, all those technologies that are so useful, and let's make data collection easier for our guys out in the field. Excellent. Well, folks, we've taken you right up to the hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I've really enjoyed our panelists, all the insights they've shared. Ben, great job on the research. The great news is that if you download this smart farming report on farmjournal.com, I believe Ben has his contact information at the end of that report there. Is that?
We do
saw
have
your-
contact information, yes.
I saw your email there. So if you have further questions about the data, or you want to see the Farm Journal intelligence team take that research down another path, reach out to Ben, let him know what you're thinking, and hopefully we can make that happen. But I believe, unless let me check the Q&A one last time here. Looks like we don't have any additional questions. So folks, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. And we'll see you again on another Farm Country Update from Farm Journal.